Hello everyone. We are going today in this video to review the adventure encounter and monster designer that I've created in Excel. And this video is going to serve as a walkthrough for those folks who have access to it. This is something that I'm making available through my Patreon and Ko-fi for those who support me. So the video will be shared on those locations so that everybody has access to it. You can see how to use the tools. This is something that I've been working on for a long time. It started early in, I think even D&D Next and then 5e as a sort of way that I was tracking encounter difficulty when I was creating encounters. And as I did more and more design work for 5th edition, I just kept refining it. And it is based on a tool that was created for D&D 5e by Scott Davenport. I think it was called the Encounter Planner. You can still find it out there, I think. And that was something that I then worked on and refined. So we're going to take a look here at this. We'll start with the info screen actually, and you can see that the title of this Adventure Encounter Monster Design Tools, I have like a bunch of different names for it. So, hey, if you come up with a really great name for it, let me know what it is. It does a lot of different things. And really what it is, it's sort of my go-to tool for whenever I'm designing things, whether it's as a DM or if I'm doing some professional work. So if you've collaborated with me on a project, chances are I may have shared some piece of this at some point because I was working on something. I said, hey, take a look at this, see what you think. So you can find all the information. If you're looking for this and you don't have this, you can find it through alphastream.org. I've got a support me place on the side of my homepage that you can click on support me, and you'll find all about how to get this. It's a very low entry cost, and hopefully you stick around and support me so that I can do more cool things. If you are part of my community, one of the things I'm also looking for is feedback on how to make this more useful for you. So take a look at it, play around with it, create some encounters, create some monsters, different things like that, and let me know, hey, what would you like it to do in addition to what it does, or what should it do differently, and so on. Feedback appreciated. So this info tab, and this is an Excel, I should say that. This is an Excel tool. I may move it into some other platform that's more accessible because not everybody has Microsoft Office. But, and let me know that as well. I'm curious in that feedback, but Excel is something that I use all the time for work, so it's pretty easy to have it. One nice thing is once you purchase Excel, the versions just keep on working forever. I have not that recent a version, and it just keeps on working just fine. So hopefully this is something that works well for people. I know there are a lot of converters out there too. If not, let me know. The first tab that I have here, the first worksheet, is an overview tab, and it walks through each of the different pieces, which are in color bars matching the bottom. And that lets you know what the point of this is. So the Adventure and Encounter Designer, it's trying to ascertain the challenge level of each encounter in your adventure, and it's tracking XP, treasure, and other factors across the entirety of the adventure, which is kind of cool. So if you're publishing a work and you want to know what's that whole thing provide to everybody, or this is an arc in my campaign, or however it is that you're organizing things, you get to see that additive benefit that you're giving out. How much treasure, how much gold am I giving out across of all of this section of my adventure or my campaign. We have a little instructions section that just reminds you what's going on here. Fields in green are fields where we expect you to enter information. There are often little comments that I've added, which you see as a red triangle in Excel that shows that there's additional information, tips, and so on. And the first thing you can do is you can start by entering the average party level or the exact levels of your characters. Then for each encounter, you are entering the information for the monsters that are there. You can name them. You can say how many there are of each type, CR, and so on. It's going to calculate a bunch of stuff. It's going to tell you how hard this is. And we'll walk through everything that it shows you there. There's a summary up at the top level that tells you everything that's going on, and then you can see the specifics down below. Same thing with treasure. You can enter the value of treasure and magic items, the rarity, and it calculates that. It doesn't yet calculate using Xanathar's all of the treasure as expected, but that's something that I'm going to be implementing. I'll be adding to it. It does 10 encounters. You could copy the spreadsheet, so you can, literally just right here and copy. And you can do that again, or you could add more below if you're comfortable doing that. So a lot of different ways you can do it. Create new files, whatever works. Then the other tabs are additional benefits that I use as I'm designing. Rules is just a go-to place where I can look at all of the rules that I usually need to access when I'm underwater, right? If the characters are underwater for an underwater encounter, what does that mean? So this collects all of that together. Traps are made sort of in a different way, and so all those building blocks of a trap, I like to pull those together into this worksheet. Monster creation, big part of this. This is a big thing that monsters behave very differently. If you've seen these 3 blog posts that I've made on why monsters don't work as well as you think they should for DMs, that's something I take into account when I'm designing monsters. And so I have a whole bunch of tables that look at what the DMG tells you to do, what actually the monster manual does, and Volo's Guide to Everything Monsters do, so that you can compare off of that and make decisions as to what it should look like. And a lot of times we're given options as to sort of an A or B track we can take for any particular part about a monster. So that's spelled out for you. One of the things I provide also is common damage or hit point expressions, so you know what all the average of those dice are. Most of us can do the math pretty easily, but it's nice to just have it there and be able to turn to it and pick it up off of a sheet and not worry about whether we did the math correctly. Then we have magic items. These are, if you've seen the recent supplement that I made, then you have all of this information, but this is sort of what I derived it from. And I provide my sources there because it comes from a lot of other people thinking about it. So you can refer to these tables in thinking about how to award magic items. Then there are 2 other ones that I use periodically. I think versions of these appeared in the original version of the spreadsheet. And NPCs I use a fair bit because often you need to have some sort of human type threat. You need to have a town guard, you need to have ruffians, bandits, whatever. And so having a list of all those NPCs and seeing what are my options, because there actually really aren't that many, can be helpful. That's the point of this spreadsheet. And you can filter it or sort however you want. And then a list of monsters in the monster manual. I may change this to be just an SRD list. It doesn't give you a lot of information about it, but I think it's easier to know what's actually in the SRD. I think that would actually work better. So it's usually what I end up looking at anyway. So I may change that up. Again, feedback appreciated. So let's dive into the adventure designer portion of things. You can put the title of your name here. So this is not actually the Clockwork Tower is an adventure that I'm writing, but this is not information specific to the adventure. So I just give it a title. This is whatever you want it to be, my adventure. And when you're starting out initially in this spreadsheet, you can just choose what your average level is. So if you're saying, oh, this is for 5, 6 level characters, then you can just choose the dropdown. Or you can just manually enter, and this reminds you, so you can just type in whatever it is. So if one person's 4th and one person's 5th, and then the other 3 or 6, then that'll work just fine to tell you, well, your average is 5. It's calculating it based off of what you've got here. And now this override isn't going to work because you've changed away the formula, but so it's just sort of one time, but it's fine. You can just type it in there, and it works just fine. So this is sort of your first area where you are looking at possibly entering information. And now the spreadsheet will work off of this expected average party level, right? So you're assuming these 5 characters with level 6, 6, 6, 5, and 4, they're going to show up. And what does that mean? Well, that tells us what the thresholds are for the different challenge levels, easy, medium, hard, and deadly. And I've color-coded those. That color gets used further down the spreadsheet. It tells us the amount of XP that each character should earn in an adventuring day before they must rest. It tells us how much XP is needed for them to gain their next level. And the XP that this particular adventurer does, which is based on things I've entered in the past. So initially, it'll start at 0 if you have a blank spreadsheet. And anytime that we've entered information for an encounter, then it's going to show up here what the current challenge levels are. Another thing I like looking at that's up on this top, so this is kind of a top summary area, right? 5 characters in the party. So far, I've designed 3 encounters. Here are the different thresholds. Here are the different information on XP and the encounter levels. Another thing I like to have up at the very top is the different skill bonuses that are expected around this level of play. And we can see how it's calculated a bit when we look at the rules section. But there are some kind of notes here that tell you. So based on the average party level of 5, which is what we currently have, this is what you should expect a character that's proficient in the skill and just has a 10 in that associated attribute. That's going to give you this. This is what you expect to have their bonus. This is someone who is proficient in it and probably has like a 12, so they're just okay at it. And then this is someone who is trained in it. So, I'm a druid and I'm trained in nature, right? It's something I care about. So my ability score is going to go up with it eventually to 20. Versus in this case, this person probably won't go up beyond that 12 in the attribute because it's not a primary ability. And then this is the idea of expertise. Someone who's trained and they have something like a rogue or a bard that is focused on it. And so they can get really good results. And this lets us see at a glance, all right, +3, +4, +7, +10. That's the variance in what people will have for skill checks. So as I'm writing encounters, I can think about this and keep this in mind, right? That if they roll a 10, they can get anything between a 13 and a 20, right? But they might also get as low as a 1 plus that bonus there. So that's kind of useful. This does not yet work, this how many magic items by rarity. This is using the Xanathar's guide, so I've been working on this, but it's not there yet. But what does work is it gives you the total of all the gold across all the encounters. So let's get into a particular encounter. So you'll see this repeated throughout the rest of the document. The summary section up top, and then each encounter here. And as we scroll down, you can see this here. It's just repeated each section, right? And so let's take a look, and we can call things. Again, green is where you can enter stuff. So I'm going to write, like, oh, this is the graveyard. So that's my graveyard encounter, and I might say, well, there's some spiders that are out in the graveyard or whatever, and then I can choose to populate what I want. And what I like to do when I'm creating encounters is I'll think about things like, oh, there's some spiders, right? So maybe this is not graveyard because that might sound a little spooky, but maybe it's the ruined outer ruined courtyard. So maybe this is like a haunted castle, but the outside is just sort of ruined, and there are brambles and things like that. And that's where I might say, like, okay, in the ruins of a tower, there might be these spiders. So I might look at the list of monsters that are in the SRD and think, okay, what kind of spiders can I have? I can phase spider, giant wolf spider, and you can plug in the CRs. So this is the stuff that I write here. And then I start toying around, well, what do I want as a challenge? And currently, for characters that are of APL 5, it's an easy challenge, right? If I just do a phase spider. But I can play around. I can think like, well, what if I have, 3 giant spiders? And maybe I have, 4 giant wolf spiders, right? And so you can start playing with it. And because these are 5th level characters, this is all very easy, right? Because it's not particularly challenging to have that. In fact, not until we hit 2,550 will we get to medium, right? So I could have 5 giant spiders and 4 giant wolf spiders. That's a total of 3,000 XP. We're not yet to hard. So, spiders are pretty easy. But if I think, well, and then let's add 2 phase spiders. Well, now I'm at a deadly challenge because I just added 2 CR3 creatures, and that's 7,800 XP, which is 2,000 more XP than what my deadly range is for this party level. And again, this is based on the party level. If I had, suddenly 8th level characters, and in fact, if I have a 6th level character, now everything's different, right? The XP is different. So all of this is calculated based on the party level, as we talked about before. So I've got my 5th level party, on an average 5th level party, and that's where I can think of, okay, well, that's way too deadly. What if I have sort of a boss, like 1 phase spider? I have 5 giant spiders. This is like a swarms of spiders, right? I mean, not spider swarm, but I've got 5 giant spiders, 4 giant wolf spiders. It's probably too much, but I probably don't want that many creatures. But that would be a hard challenge, right? And that's the point of this tool, is to let you play with that and think through, well, maybe I don't want this many things on the map. Does it really change it that much to remove the giant wolf spiders, a phase spider, and 5 giant spiders? Well, what if I have, what if I just have, the phase spiders, and that's easier to run? And then I can play with it and say, oh, 3 of them, a hard challenge. You know what? That's great. Just 3 phase spiders kind of jumping around, ambushing, phasing in and out. awesome, I'm good, I like this. Or if I want it to be a little more complex and I want that sort of boss feel of the strange spider that warps, maybe because the ruins have something that's caused it to phase. Then I could look at something like, well, all right, a medium challenge or go up to a hard challenge. And this lets you play with those numbers, right? And by comparing the total encounter experience points, which are right here, to the levels up here, we can see, how close are we to the next tier in either direction. So this is sort of medium, in the hard range. Cool. Right. So that can be a neat way to do it. And you see here now our encounter difficulty, encounter 1 is hard. You can add notes. So you could say something like, oh, there could be, grasping vines could be an idea for just notes, or tablet with information, something like that. So a lot of times I make notes to myself while I'm creating an adventure on just things that seem cool. And then later I can put it into the text. It doesn't have any math to it. It's just notes that I'm making here. Now, if the grasping vines are really problematic, if it's more than difficult terrain, then I may want to take that into account for my challenge level, so that it's not too ruinous. If nobody can move around and attack the spiders and they're phasing in and out, that's probably a bad idea. So, things like this don't have a stated impact on CR, so that's a thing you just have to take into account. But that's just a note section here for you to enter what you want. And then we have the money. And so you can say, okay, there's, 20 copper pieces and 4 silver and so on. And that gives you the gold value here summed up. And this is the price of the, a jewel worth 10 gold pieces or something like that. And then you could write magic items that are here. This will eventually be calculated into the overall magic item distribution once I add that functionality in a future update. Then we can go to the second encounter. We can say something like, okay, and actually, let's do the third one here because I've got some undead, which would fit the theme. So I might say, okay, for the third encounter, maybe they deal with something on the way in, and now in the actual, heart of the keep. And maybe I have a note like, must destroy the beating heart that gives life to all of the undead or something like that. There could be some kind of neat concept like that. And so I make a note of it. And then I think, okay, around that concept, what am I going to use? And currently we have ghasts, ghouls, and wights, and their CR is listed. Again, this is just stuff you type in. So you look at your whatever your sources are, pick a monster and do that. This does not pick monsters for you because I don't want to add that sort of information in here. But yeah, so you just manually enter what you've got. Ghast is CR2, ghoul is 1, wight 3. And so you can kind of think of like, well, what if we have a whole bunch of ghouls coming after you and one ghast that's defending the heart? All right, well, that could work, and we could even step it up a bit, hard challenge. Great. Or maybe we want to have more like a mix where it's 3 ghouls, 2 ghasts, and we want a wight. Does that work? Yeah, 4,400 XP. In fact, we could probably even step it up because our PCs are probably pretty strong. So maybe there are 2 wights. Let's see, is that too crazy? 7,250. Yeah, that's maybe a little much. So 1 wight, and we have that's 6,500, which is a little bit high, but not for a lot of parties. So because of these various powers of these monsters, I'd probably step it down a bit. But yeah, something like this can work, right? 6,000 XP. It's just getting into deadly territory, 200 XP into it. That's probably pretty good. And that's how I use this part of the tool, right? Make these sorts of decisions, and this will be pretty good. I can write it into my adventure, and then I can do playtesting after that. Again, wealth is tracked here, so I can say, okay, there's something worth 100 gold, and then that gets tracked here, and now the total is... Oh, it did not get summed up. Hey, we're testing right now. So I'll have to see how I get that to work. All right, we'll play with that later, and I will issue a fix. So this works across all of these, right? All of these different encounters will work in the same way. And as we're filling them out, we get to see what the encounter difficulty is like. We get to see how our total adventure experience is adding up. And we know that this is what it's going to take for them to level up. In fact, if we did a whole bunch of encounters, like, how much XP do we need? A fair bit. But if we had like, let's make, we do this encounter and we do this encounter. And now we're almost there. So we get in another encounter here, encounter 6. If this is more like a campaign that we're doing a whole bunch of fights, then we see we're going to actually level up. So it just got filled in green because it's leveling up. Similarly, if this were a single day, this is more than the expected XP for a day. So those things are there to remind us, right? Like, hey, this is more than a day's worth. So we'd probably want to think, okay, well, 17,000 is what we want. So really maybe after this third fight, we take a rest. And then the other could be on day 2. So you can use that to plan where your days should break. And then you know whether they're going to level based on everything that's here. And you can do the math across by looking at what you currently have. Cool. All right. So I hope that's pretty useful. Yeah. If you have any questions about any of this functionality, just let me know. I'm glad to cover this in through the Patreon and Ko-fi. I can add updates and explain things there, or in our Discord. Let's go to the rules tab. So this is the tab that I refer to all the time when I am trying to think through different aspects of an adventure. So one thing you can see is those skill bonuses that were in the Adventure Designer. Those come from this table here, and this is something that Merrick Blackman sort of broke down. It was the first time I'd really seen it broken down. And so I looked at this. I don't know if I used exactly his breakdown or played with it. I know I toyed with it a couple different times, so it could have ended up differently. But this tells you, what the assumptions are and what you can expect at different tiers, what the pluses or minuses are. So that's what that table is using. Our skill DCs per the rules of what is very easy, medium, and so on. So just a general guideline of what thematically it should be like compared to what the characters can do. And then just a list of skills. And as much as I know what all these skills are, I whenever I'm writing an encounter, it's really easy for me to go, okay, well, what are the skills again? What skill applies? So I love having a list here that I can just look at and be like, okay, here are the different skills in the game. Similarly, a list of all the conditions, right? And I put exhaustion a little separately there because it's a little different. All our conditions that can happen here. The list of tools and kits, right? These are really good to have, and I like making use of these. In case you forget what a cobbler is, I put that there. It's not working on cobblestones, trust me on this. But this is good to have, and then indented when they're a type, so different musical instruments. Because it's fun when you have that. I find that when I have this on my spreadsheet, I remember to use it. So I'm like, you know what? Why don't I have treasure be a musical instrument? What are the musical instruments that are in the player's handbook? Oh, here they are. Great. It'll be a lute, right? Or I should reward people who can use a vehicle because we're on this chariot that's out of control. Okay, vehicles land. These lists really help me a lot, actually. And just some notes on rules you'll find periodically here. I have a little piece here. This is just really something that once with Sean Merwin, I was helping him with some design for a class that he was running on design. And so I broke down what's in a background. And I figured, hey, why not? I'll just put that in the spreadsheet too, in case I ever need to refer to it. So that's why this is here. Similarly, where do you get feats? So these levels are listed here. Just notes that I happen to put down here. And they're useful enough that I just kept them in the spreadsheet. The levels of exhaustion, I am not a big fan of the exhaustion rules, but there they are. Jumping, this comes up a lot. It's really important to know that the number of feet you can jump on a long jump is your strength score, as long as you have the 10 feet of movement. So, and if it's not, it's half. So if you have a 5 foot by 5 foot pit, everybody in your party can jump that 100% of the time. Including if they're just right next to it, because that's just the way the rules work. And early D&D adventures actually had mistakes around this. They would have a check, and now you can add a check if something complicates it, like if there are vines or mist or something that makes it hard or to pull this off. Great, you can have a check, but in general, those are the rules. It's important to have them. And some other notions here to clear an obstacle, what a high jump is. So all that's here. Climbing, It's difficult. It's as if it were difficult terrain, but not difficult terrain, so it can stack with it. Um, some other notes here. It's funny. My friends and I always laugh about rope, that it's not really clear what a rope should do for a climb check. A magical rope grants advantage on checks made to climb it. Does a knotted rope do that too? You tell me. Leave the answers in the comments. Dispel magic. This is one where I like to know exactly what these rules are. And same thing with counterspell. That 60-foot range is critical. What's the check? All of that. Underwater combat. I love creating underwater scenes. Really fun. It's good to have all these right there. Time. A round is 6 seconds. A minute is 10 rounds. 10 minutes is 100 rounds. Just when I need it. The rules on cover. Vision, obscurement, and concealment, because these are kind of actually sort of interesting once you break them down and look at all of it, and things like true sight, dark vision. They have specific rules and wordings, and it's good to have that down whenever I need to refer to it. Damaging objects. I love having situations and adventures where, like I was saying before, right, the beating heart that's in the center of the chapel, and to kill the undead, one of the things you can do is you can actually destroy the heart. So, what are the rules for damaging objects? So it's good to have this as a reference point. And then the schools of magic. This is also something I love having on a DM screen, because all the time characters will be like, I cast detect magic. What school is it? And I go, yeah, what school is that? I don't memorize things like that well. So I like having them around and being able to look at it. And same thing with an adventure. If I'm writing about an effect that someone may cast detect magic on, well, it's good to know what the school should be and what a kind of effect you might want to describe. So so this is the rules tab. Now we'll take up speed. These others should be, most of them will be pretty quick to cover. Rules on traps. They appear in the Dungeon Master's Guide. They appear in Xanathar's. So I give you both because I like to have a reference of both. Basically Xanathar's just sort of standardizes it into one number versus there is a range that's given. Xanathar's comes after, so in some ways this is more what they were thinking at this point in time, right? So the attack bonus is higher, really. It should be more of that top end. And the DC should be the top end for these last two. I don't love the way traps are done in 5e, but it's good to have in mind what the rules are, and then you can bend them and fit them to your desire. But it's good to have that. Traps have sort of this, what is the DC, what is the attack bonus, and then what is the severity based on the level of the characters. So it's sort of like you say, it is a deadly trap, and my characters are first level, so then this is what's taking place. Or it's a setback, and this is what's taking place. So the two things intersect to give you the full save or attack plus the damage. This does not change in Xanathar, so it's all in one little bit. Spell equivalent by level, which is given to us in Xanathar. So if your trap does a spell, here's what you can think of it being, what it should be, what's appropriate for that level characters. What's the XP for a complex trap, which is given to you in Xanathar's. Here's some rules on what do the rules actually say about seeing a trap, which is interesting. Summary of how complex traps work. And then some damage expressions because the damage tends to be D10s. Then I just did D10s and then the kind of D6 and D8 adjacent expressions. You can find more damage expressions over here. And damage expressions really saying what is the average, right? So 2d10, the average damage is 11. 3d10, 16, and so on. So and you'll see more of those when we go to this spreadsheet. All right, this one, I use this all the time too, because creating monsters well takes a lot of work. And it's really interesting to know how monsters work, so I love looking at this. What this does is it provides two tables. One is from the DMG. This is what the DMG tells you to do when creating a monster, which is different than what Wizards of the Coast uses. Blago Holding did an analysis of what does Wizards of the Coast actually do in the Monster Manual in Volos, and that's where we get this table. And you can sort of compare them. So it's sort of interesting if you just sort of go like, okay, a CR2 monster should have 86 to 100 hit points according to the DMG. And if I look at what it has 45 hit points in Monster Manual or Volos. That's your average. Your AC is the same, but your hit points are way lower in actuality in most monsters. Your attack bonus is much higher. Your damage per round is lower than the 15 to 20 range. It's at the very bottom of the range. And then your save DC is a little bit lower in practical use. That's how it ends up being. So I like looking at both of these tables when I'm creating and deciding. I also walk you through what the logic does. So if you're looking at things like your hit points are determined from this table based on the size of the monster. So if I am a medium creature, I should use D8s. That tells me what this average die is, which we can then use common damage or hit point expressions. So, if I'm supposed to be in D8s, then I can use this table to figure out what the average hit points should be. And then you get extra, or if you give them resistances and immunities, it's as if your hit points were higher. So that tells you about this kind of thing, and so on. And it also walks you through things like, for example, when you're just creating a damage, or when creating it your attacks for the monsters, you can approach it in different ways depending on what you prefer to do. So I talk through some of those options in various places here. I also add things on what different designers have said at times. So you'll find some notes there. You'll find notes over here on what the Blog of Holding said, which is kind of interesting. And then this is an area where you can calculate hit points. So you sort of enter into these white areas here, and it'll tell you what is the average hit points. So you can put that into your stat block. Same thing with damage. So if you have a certain number of damage dice and this die and the modifier to damage is that, and that tells you that. Same thing here with your hit points. You can do what is your con modifier based on your constitution score, and then it'll calculate that out for you. What are the monster types? This is always good to know. So aberration, beast, etc., fiend, giant. Quick ways to make monsters. Same thing from Sly Flourish. So Mike Merle's, what are his rules? What are Sly Flourish's rules? Average hit points for a PC at a given level using this formula, which is a pretty good estimate. So I like to think about that when I'm thinking about my monsters or my traps, how hard they're hitting. What are the hit points the 8th level party probably has? Well, they have an average of 59 each. Okay, cool. Ability scores, what is the bonus? So, if a dragon has 20 dexterity, well, that's +5. Just easy way to look it up versus doing the math. Constitution bonus per hit die. So if you have a 9 hit dice and you have a +3, then that's what that is giving you. Cool. So that's hopefully very useful for everybody who creates monsters. Magic items. This is what you probably have seen some of the rules that I talked about in my latest Evolving Magic Items product. But here I break it down a little more granularly. What is the DMG telling us? What does that really actually then mean based on the amount of gold you should be gaining? And there's some interesting things like, at 16th level, this is the total gold that you will have received when you have reached 16th level. And at this level, you're getting this much, right? So each of these levels is giving you 18,000 gold for each character, which is really kind of incredible. And then it gets even higher. So that's, at level 20, you've reached 800,000 gold pieces that you've apparently done something with. That's why we created the Acquisitions Incorporated rules. How many magic items are awarded by tier from Xanathar's? Same thing here. Breaking it out by rarity. So this is all good reference. You'll need those rules that are in those books to make full use of it. Some information on the number of encounters that PCs face based on DM David's analysis, and how often you get a treasure hoard, basically if you're using the DMG rules. Andy Perlman looks at just good items, how many good items you're going to have. So I like having all this stuff at my fingertips, and that's the point of this. Last 2 tabs, very quick, because these are just sort of really things that existed there beforehand. I like using this NPCs. As I said before, there are a lot of situations when you're writing adventures, running your own campaign, where you need a guard or a villager or whatever, and you're thinking, well, what stat block do I have? And so what I'm often doing is I'm, selecting something like certain ranges of CRs. So I might select a bunch of CRs. So you can click on that down arrow and just say like, okay, I want something, pretty weak. So let me look at sort of, up until 2. All right, well, those are all the options I have. And a lot of times there aren't many options, right? Or if I'm saying like, okay, I need a CR2, humanoid NPC type, what do I have? Well, 2 is actually a good CR, and then still you only have this many options. So when you're trying to describe a person, you think, well, it's not a turtle druid, it's not a spellcaster. I guess it's got to be a berserker, a bandit captain, right? Like that's all you can do. So because it's so limited, I really like having this spreadsheet to help me realize what those limitations are and make the best choice possible. A lot of times when you're working for a company and they are creating an OGL product, you must use these things, right? Or create your own monster, which is time. And if you're not getting paid for it, then you may not want to choose that option every time. So it's limited, and that's why I like having this tab a lot. I use this very often. Yeah. So again, feedback always is welcome. Let me know what does and doesn't work for you as you're working through this. All right. Then last one is monsters. This is all the monster manual monsters. It was in the spreadsheet that was in the original version. It can be handy. I honestly don't use this. I tend to use D&D Beyond or other sources. There's a spreadsheet there. There's a website that lists just only the SRDs. So I tend to use that a lot. But this may be helpful for those same kinds of reasons. And you can sort it and all that kind of thing if you want. So those are the tools. I hope that's been a helpful overview for you. Please do reach out, whether it's through Ko-fi or Patreon, or if it's in our Discord. Great, even that's really the best place to hit me up. You can always email me directly and let me know how this tool is working for you, because I want to make it useful for a lot of authors and break down some of that confusion. If you've been following me, you know that a lot of what I'm doing related to Patreon and Ko-fi is around a future. Well, it's 2 things. I want to create better products, and so this helps me a lot. It already is. Like this month, I'm commissioning some art that I wasn't going to be able to afford, and now I can. Thank you. And the second thing is to work on a series of videos that's going to be called Success in RPGs, and that is going to walk through how you achieve success in what is a very, very challenging area. And one of the things I'm trying to do is break down those barriers, right? And this is also the point of this tool. Let's break down the barriers. Let's have good tools that people can use and sort of demystify the process, make it simpler. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. If you like the work I do, please consider supporting my work. You can see the most 2 recent products that I've put up on DriveThru. The Game Master's Guide to Evolving Magic Items. It's been really well received. I haven't checked since it hit copper, but I'm very glad that it hit copper as quickly as it did. We'll see what it can keep growing. Rules for Collaborative Campaign Creation, available. That one's available either as part of joining the Patreon or Ko-fi, or for joining my mailing list on alphastream.org. And you get both if you join the Ko-fi, plus these design tools we just talked about. So that is hopefully very good for you. And I do these Lore of Neverwinter streams that you can find on YouTube and when they're live and afterwards on Twitch as well. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.